Here to talk about, can sports marketing help your brand trump digital disruption? My name is Jennifer Chase. I'm the VP of Digital Sales and Solutions here at Mediacorp, and I'm very excited to welcome a very international panel today. We have Patrick Stiegman, Vice President of Global Digital Content for ESPN, and it's a #1 global sports media brand. Welcome, Patrick. He's joining us from the US today.
Good evening, good morning.
Good evening to you. It's about 10 p.m. his time. Welcome to Tilman, Wendt, who is actually joining us from Germany. It's about 4 a.m. Tilman's time. He's the Executive Director for Digital and Brand Marketing from SPORTFIVE, one of the #1 global sports agencies. Welcome, Tilman.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for having me.
And we have Mark Chu, Managing Director for Reddentes Sports, Redd+E and CEO of Team Flash. And Mark is joining us from Singapore today. Welcome, Mark.
Good morning on a wet morning from Singapore. Hi.
So today we're talking about global sports media trends. We're talking about what makes sports fans tick. You know, what are they passionate around, what resonates with them, and how brands can connect with them. We're also going to be taking a deep dive into esports and again, how brands can connect with this fan base. But before we get started, what we want to do is a quick poll just to understand where the audience is at when it comes to sports marketing. So is sports marketing part of your brand's marketing mix? Always, very often, sometimes, rarely, or never? If you could just take a couple of moments to answer. Okay, the results are in. 35% were sometimes, 26% were rarely, 13% were never. When it comes to those who, do it more often, 15% always and 11% very often. So we've got a fair amount of the audience today who haven't done a lot of sports marketing. And I think the content we cover today will give you a lot of insights into how you go about doing it and how you can connect with sports fans. So thanks, everyone. So let's get into it. We want to start with the Tokyo Olympics. And after a year of being delayed, it finally came. And while the stadiums were empty, there were amazing moments throughout it, whether it was Singapore nearly getting a bronze in table tennis, the Italians and their amazing result on track and field, and the world records that were broken in the pool that we didn't think was possible. So the sports fans definitely connected with the Olympics, and they did that online and via FTA, all thanks to technology. Mediacorp had the official media rights here in Singapore, so let's go through some of those results. We delivered 14 live streaming channels to fans, and that was both live content, on-demand content. Every sport was covered, every event was covered. And the choice was all really in the hands of the consumer. They could consume that content when they wanted and how they wanted. So we delivered that content across every single device, which was really important. And that resulted in 1 in 2 people here in Singapore that actually watched the games, 50% of the population. That certainly exceeded all expectations. In addition to that, Mediacorp drove another 266,000 single sign-ons, so that helped our first-party data. From a MeWatch point of view, which is our OTT platform, we delivered 20.2 million video views. We also created highlights that was housed both within MeWatch, but we also housed that on our YouTube channel, and that delivered a further 5.9 million video views. But most importantly, there was a lot of interest from the industry. There were over 50 brands that advertised across the Olympics content, across OTT and FTA. Top 3 sports, badminton, table tennis and swimming, no surprise. And when it came to the consumption of the content, this is where it's really important to deliver across every single device. And as you can see here, 50% of the video views were web and mobile users, 40% mobile app, and 10% TV app or smart TV. But it wasn't just about the fact that a lot of audiences were engaged in consuming the content. It was also about the sponsors as well. So YouGov released their brand index, which measures consumer attitudes around brands in market, and in this case, in Japan. And as you can see, all the major sponsors of the Olympics this year definitely rated higher when it came to the buzz factor. And buzz factor is a great gauge when it measures the amount of noise that you're making in market. And as you can see here, they measured higher with Olympic fans versus the general population. So they did a good job of creating that noise, and it was effective. But not only that, it's also about ad awareness. And this is another key metric when you're measuring the efficacy of a sponsorship around sports. And as you can see here, all the major sponsors did very well when it came to ad awareness with the Olympic fans versus the general Japanese population. So again, they were really effective in reaching the target audience efficiently. So I've given you an overview of the reach and the engagement around a very recent big sporting event. And you can see the effect and the impact that the sponsors made as well. Now I'm going to hand it over to Patrick, who's going to talk to you about trends, global trends, what resonates with audiences and how brands can leverage that. Over to you, Patrick.
Thanks, Jenny, and it's a pleasure to be with everyone. Even though I'm an editor by trade, my job here, if it's done at the end of the night, we're going to get a lot more people in that always and very often into the marketing mix, because I can tell you it'll be always when it comes to ESPN. So I am the editorial director for global digital content. I've been at ESPN for 17 years. And my job is to oversee all of our digital content editions around the world. And the center of that is our ESPN app, and it's really focused on a growth of expansion of digital properties. Over the last 5 years, we've expanded from 7 digital editions around the outside the US, to 22 editions of ESPN.com, plus our ESPN Cricinfo bespoke a site out of India, and have grown a significant global audience to the point now we are #1 in terms of sports digital media in the US, and we also are #1 in sports digital media outside the US, making us the most trafficked sports site on the planet. And this is a key look at our hub of this. This is our ESPN app.
One app, one tap, we back. Switch the style up, never beat new track. One app, McGregor's back in town. Mystic Mac got the suits, he ain't backing down. Got Mitchell with the shots, he's a 3-point provider. Corren como locos cause they're scared of the spider. One app, taking over the scene. Connected from your phone to your TV screen. Notified all the news from away from home. Se escucha en mi phone. One app, one tap for the sports fanatics. Live scores y stats llegan automatic. Jackson, Van Gunn, they don't win that thing. Yeah, when comes brain, just wait for the bang. Acuña Jr. up at the back. Partiendo los fast forward meta just like that. Pull up with AJ Wilson controlando ese game. Post, pivot, and fade. Por respeto a su name. One app, La Liga's live on stream. Messi versus Benzema, Clásico Supreme. Third game on point, Coco setting it off. Ace down the line, the match goes to golf. ESPN goes deep otra vez. One app, one tap, it's a worldwide trend.
Wow.
So that is a look at the ESPN app. It is the hub, as I said, of our entire digital experience. While we have web options in every one of our markets, the app is really the powerhouse. It's the center of all that we do. I mentioned the 22 editions we have around the world. That includes editions in Asia and Australia, India, Singapore, Philippines, Southeast Asia. We also have a partnership with Tencent in China. Those are all expanded properties over the last 5 years. And as important as our digital news and information sites, ESPN.com editions are around the world, what we really focused on and been an emphasis in our business in the last 3 years has been streaming, and quite specifically the growth of direct-to-consumer. And for the ESPN property, that is ESPN Plus. It launched 3 years ago and has now nearly 15 million subscribers. Significant growth. It was also the precursor to Disney Plus, which I'm sure you're all aware of. It's now in 61 countries in less than 2 years, including many key markets in Asia and more to launch in November of this year. And ESPN Plus was the precursor to that. As I said, we've tripled our subscriber base just in 2020, up to nearly 15 million. We offer 14,000 live exclusive sports events on the app, on ESPN Plus each year. We have an extensive library of original content, including our famed 30 for 30 Films documentary series. We have exclusive written content and content in Spanish and soon to be other language. Clearly, while the networks at ESPN continue to be a significant business and serve tens of millions of consumers every day, we clearly understand the critical element of streaming and specifically direct-to-consumer streaming as part of our portfolio, and ESPN Plus is at the heart of that. Overall, our streaming business continues to grow, not only powered by ESPN Plus, but by our willingness to be agnostic as to how fans consume our content, whether they come in by the app or web or network television or audio or streaming or third-party channels. Our goal is to say, let's find fans where they are, serve them where they are on their terms. So last month alone, we did more than 15.3 million unique devices in terms of live streaming. And what's important is that the starts per session is more than 30 minutes per start for each of those sessions. So we're keeping people in the environment. It's a very sticky environment. And as you can see, just by last month alone, VOD, our original content, makes up about 1/3 of our portfolio of our streaming content, but it's also major sports, global sports, UEFA Euro Championships, the NBA Finals, the UFC combat sports. We really look at this globally, but also take a focus on making sure we're serving fans in each of our local markets. As I said, our audience is significant. On platform, on a given month, we're about 225 million unique users. Outside the US, that's peaked at 112 million users per month. That's up 75% over the last 4 years. But what's important to note is we have 750 million global users consuming ESPN content, meaning a significant portion of those are coming off platform, whether it's through our initiatives on Facebook or YouTube or Instagram or Snapchat or Google AMP. Again, our goal is to meet fans on their terms, serve them when they're most comfortable, hopefully bringing them back to our platforms, but also understand that we have to meet them on their terms. And again, it's a cross-platform, cross-language, cross-global, cross-time zone initiative. Our goal is really to take every piece of content we create and put it in front of as many people as possible who want to consume it. Again, regardless of platform, we want to be flexible and accommodating to fans. They are driving it at the end of the day. We're creating the content. We think it's best of class content, but they're the ones that are consuming it. We have to meet them on their terms. And we know certainly that fan behavior is changing, right? We know that 54% of global sports fans now consume coverage or highlights online. We talked about that with streaming. Sports fans are using social media while watching television, certainly while watching the games, following along in real time. It's certainly a younger audience, increasingly. 74% of millennials or sports fans watch events online at least once a week, and that number continues to increase. And we focus on our global sports, football, basketball, combat sports, NFL where appropriate, and Olympic sports are our big drivers, along with cricket. And what do the sports fans care about? They want authentic, trustworthy content. They want great storytelling. They want to be entertained. They want some personality. This is sports. It's fun. It doesn't mean there's not serious stories we cover. We do. But it's also about fun. And as we like to say, we want to surprise, delight, and engage fans every day. And we know that that narrative that we use in our editorial storytelling is also very effective in advertising. We know that in working with clients and our partnerships, that building brands through emotional communications is really important, right? One of the reasons fans flock to sports is it's the best unscripted reality television available. We don't know the outcome, and it often is very, very dramatic and very charged with emotion. You know, last year when the pandemic affected all of us in many ways that are far more important than sport, but from our sport business, everything ground to a halt. Suddenly the NBA canceled its season and other leagues followed suit around the globe in rapid fire. So we went from serving, thousands of live sporting events each month down to having no sporting events to serve. So we had to be creative. One of the things we did is accelerate the launch of our 30 for 30 documentary series called The Last Dance, a 10-part series that look at the end of the Michael Jordan era of the Chicago Bulls in the 1990s. And it was a smash success. People were following this series as though it was happening in real time. And it really underscored the power of just a great story, whether live or looking back 20 years ago. And again, why is the storytelling so important? It creates that connection, that bond with fans. You know, average internet user is now spending almost 7 hours a day online in some form or fashion, right? And advertising that utilizes the storytelling techniques are very successful. Our partnerships teams will tell you that, you know, there's a 20% greater brand cut through for advertising with the storytelling narrative, and it's 5 times more believable because it's trustworthy. You're making a connection, and it connects with the editorial storytelling that my team does as well. So speaking of that authenticity, when our parent company, the Walt Disney Company, launched Shanghai Disneyland 3 years ago, so one of the taglines was that it was going to be authentically Disney and distinctly Chinese. Well, we borrowed that same phrase and said that's got to be our approach with our ESPN.com content editions around the world. They have to be authentically ESPN, but distinctly local, fill in the blank. In this case, with our ESPN.com Singapore edition, it has to be authentically ESPN and distinctly Singaporean. So we're bringing all of the great global content, the quality, the editorial, the journalism that you would expect from ESPN, the incredible data, the live sports events. We're bringing that to bear, but we're also focusing on storylines that matter very specifically in Singapore, whether it is the Olympic Games or AFC coverage or MotoGP or when F1 or the Premier League teams are in Singapore. It matters that we have that local connection as well. It also allows us to tell stories that cut across cultures. So here's a Korean athlete in the United States competing in South Korea and then the last Winter Olympics. This is a great story that resonates because it's about human condition, and it's about overcoming challenges and finding success. It doesn't matter what the sport is. If you're even a follower of the sport, it connects with fans. That's important to our storytelling. Here's an example of a long form feature we did when we launched the 30 for 30 films Be Water about Bruce Lee last year. We commissioned artists to go in and create custom art of Bruce Lee and tell their stories as to why Bruce Lee was important to them, how he and in his career, both as an actor and as an athlete, connected with him personally. It allows us to tell stories in a very creative way. But we also know that, again, something like global football resonates everywhere. Liverpool winning the Champions League was as resonant in Singapore as it was in the US, as it was in London, as it was in Australia. So we tell stories about community and connection because, again, whether you're a fan of that sport or not, you're going to relate to the human elements inside of our storytelling. We also like to take advantage of our global scale. So we every year do something called the ESPN FC 100, where we rank the 100 best footballers in the world. And we don't do this with some person sitting in the United States deciding, or London trying to craft a list. We have 50 journalists who are located in all 6 continents who get together and poll based on the talent available and the sports that the teams available in each of their markets to come up with a collaborative definitive list of the top 100 players. It shows the scale that we can bring to bear across the world. And again, because of our partnership or ownership by the Walt Disney Company, we're able to connect with our partners such as Marvel and Lucasfilms to create bespoke content around sport that taps into those brands. So we can take an NFL draft prospect and fashion him to look like the Hulk using Marvel's animators, or the top 25 women athlete in the world all created as superheroes by Marvel, or tie into the Star Wars series by having a connection of the world of soccer. It really is unique storytelling that's bespoke to our relationship as part of the Walt Disney Company. And as I mentioned before, a big part of our reach is off platform. We certainly want as many fans as possible to come to ESPN app, ESPN editions. And we know that users of the app consume 5 times more content than non-users. We know users of ESPN Plus come to the app 5 times more than regular users. But we also know we have to reach fans off platform. So whether it's 35 million followers on Facebook or 73 million on Twitter or 37 million plus on Instagram, and now the #1 overall sports brand on TikTok, we really feel like we have to not only reach the audience on their terms, as I've said, but also reach the audience in different generations at a comfort level and a time zone and a format that is most comfortable to them. And we've had tremendous, not just audience success, but business and advertising success on these platforms. And part of that advertising initiative is also branded content. So I'm sure many of you will recognize this from the Singapore Tourism Board that was part of our ESPN.com Singapore edition, tapping into branded content that we can feature on the homepage of ESPN.com, drive users through banners and through front page editorial placements to related content that we think is really resonant for fans and connects to your brand. Another example that was in advance of the Olympics, our partnerships team commissioned a story on the history of tennis in Japan in advance of the Tokyo Olympics, and created a wonderful long form, really informative, well-written story that was presented in the same kind of design format that we would use for our editorial content. And again, are able to place that in strategic locations throughout our site to drive real value for the branded advertiser in this case. And again, our partnership with Mediacorp, not only did it allow us to utilize those same Olympic highlights on our ESPN Singapore edition during the Tokyo Games, but it allows us to capitalize on the social brands, the integrations, the radio and the DJs, the digital amplifications of those branded opportunities. It really, again, tells a story, tells the narrative storytelling that allows a unique opportunity to connect with audiences.
Thanks, Patrick. I think we've seen some amazing examples of storytelling. I want to answer a question actually that's just come in, and let's answer this now. We see more and more user-generated content created during the pandemic. How has this changed and altered ESPN's strategy to create branded content?
You know, I think the best example that I can use on how we can integrate and amplify that is through social media. I mentioned we're now the #1 sports brand on TikTok. TikTok is not about highlights of last night's Premier League match or NBA game or cricket match. It's about fun and integration. So we are able, with permission, to amplify user-generated content that we think is going to resonate to a broader audience. And we're very smart, and our social team is very smart about being authentic to each platform. So a user on Twitter is looking for something different than TikTok, than Instagram, than Facebook. And that user-generated content is actually to the benefit of our overall social sphere by able to capitalize on that, amplify it, and also drive usage and awareness to the content creator themselves.
Great. Thanks, Patrick. So you've seen some really good examples of how brands are connecting with sports fans. And I think it's a great time to introduce Tilman Wendt, who has a lot of experience in that area. Over to you, Tilman.
Thanks, Jenny. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining today, this webinar, also on behalf of my company, SPORTFIVE. So yeah, my name is Tilman, and I head up the brand activation team at SPORTFIVE for APAC, and I'd be usually based in Singapore, but currently in Europe, so it's a bit early here. But nonetheless, super excited to take you through some of the projects we're involved in. So my background is actually in brand marketing. I worked in global and regional brand marketing roles for Adidas before joining SPORTFIVE 4 years ago now. So for those who don't know SPORTFIVE, we're a global sports marketing agency. The five actually stands for the 5 key stakeholders that are part of our ecosystem. So those are the brand partners we work with to bring their sponsorships to life, the rights holders, such as football clubs, confederations, etc. Then there are the media platforms, Mediacorp, ESPN, to OTT, of course, and the fans, another key stakeholders for us. That those are the guys we obviously want to engage, not just from our own event point of view, but also from our brand partner point of view. And then there's the staff, us, like myself, and we glue basically all those stakeholders together. So that's SPORTFIVE. Now, what's our key purpose? It's about creating value and sustainable value for our partners. And to be honest, I can honestly say this is not just a hollow promise, but something we believe in. I think, you know, from my perspective, our business has changed substantially over the last years and over the last decade in particular. We really replaced that sort of traditional push strategy of purely printing a sponsor on a shirt, on a shirt into much more of a pull approach, if you want. So some sponsors don't even want that traditional signage anymore, but purely activation concepts to drive conversions or engagement, right? So we really sort of look into that and come up with solutions for our partners to deliver that sort of brand long-term value. Next slide, please. So just a quick overview in terms of our business and numbers. So our business models in our core markets globally are slightly different. Looking at Europe and Asia, we work closely with over 200 rights holders to manage their commercial and media rights. There's a strong club business in Europe with clubs like BVB, Atletico Madrid, you name it, and the likes. Here in Asia, in terms of rights holders, are the ASEAN Football Federation, for which we organized the AFF Suzuki Cup. And then there are things like the SMBC Singapore Open in golf. Yeah. For some of these rights holders, we also produce the world feeds with over 10,000 hours of programming a year. So we have really strong broadcast teams across the various regions to produce events like the Handball World Championship, for example, or the AFF Suzuki Cup, yeah. And tons of other events as well. Now, looking at the US, our business is very focused around athlete management, yeah, with over 350 athletes that we manage globally. That goes across, you know, US sports, in particular the big codes like NFL, NBA, and MLB. But we have, you know, tremendous talents that we represent. Giannis Antetokounmpo in basketball, obviously. Some superstars in golf, the likes of John Rahm or Phil Mickelson, right? So it's a great portfolio that we manage in that sense, in that regard. But you know, if it's individuals or federations, the concept pretty much stays the same for us. We basically leverage our global net sales network with over 60,000 brands to sell their rights. And we are very successful in doing this with over 1 billion cross sales delivered last year. So moving on to the next slide. So talking about content, and that's really the key focus of this presentation today. I want to talk you through some examples of you know, the events that we manage. You see a few here on the slide. On the top, you know, a few examples on what we do for AFF Suzuki Cup, some tactical posts, some interviews which we did with Singapore legend Fandi Ahmad, and on the bottom, you know, some animated content around the Singapore Open, which is around the three big stars we had here playing: Matt Kuchar, Justin Rose, and Henrik Stenson, who finished gold, silver, and bronze at the last Olympics, so the one before Tokyo. Yeah, so we do some really great content, but I think what is absolutely crucial from our perspective is look at the right target audience, the right platform, and the right exact moments to push that content, right? So if we look at a lot of brands still, what they do is they create a great campaign, but they say, hey, we spent a lot of money and now we have a great campaign film, but we need to push it out on each of those, on every channel we have, right? So what you often see then is that that content goes out on Twitter, it goes out on Facebook, it goes out on even LinkedIn, right? But that is not the ideal scenario, right? The channel needs to be right. So if I'm producing a 50-minute documentary around a player or a federation, I don't want to put this on a news-driven and really sort of short attention span platform like Twitter. Yeah, I want to rather put it on a platform where long-form content can live, right? So I'd rather look at YouTube, right? So it just needs to be the right content form for the right platform. Similarly, the time needs to be right. We don't need to post an animated winner pose of a player 3 days after the win. The moment has passed, right? So we need to scenario plan and have it ready to go out right after the final whistle. Finally, everything needs to be lined up for the right target group. If I want to engage Gen Z, and Patrick was mentioning this earlier, right? We want to do something playful. So we're looking at putting in our TikTok, right? So it just needs to be the right match all the time. And, you know, I think a lot of brands still try to force content on channels, but that's just not the way things work, right? I think it's a great example also when we look at format, what the Bundesliga did recently. So they started a partnership with TikTok again, and they actually recorded all the games in a 9:16 format, vertical format, right? To make it purpose-built instead of just forcing retrospectively format into a video. So coming to the next slide, and I'm just going to play a little video here around how we do things for a So it's, you know, we do tons of content, obviously. Here you see some examples of long form content when we shot in Bali ahead of the tournament. We go into the countries to do lockups between influencers and players or coaches, like you see here in Thailand and Cambodia. Do our own big campaigns. So this is a campaign we did where we took of fans and weaved it into a captain's armband. Obviously, live content stays at the heart of things. Every second match updates, crucial to keep people engaged. Live content all the time, lots of tactical posts, as I said, they need to be ready to go. On-ground content, work a lot with influencers on the ground, legends, you know, all that great behind-the-scenes content from the locker rooms, from the player arrivals and so on. Some of the influencers who work across the region, you know, they know the inside players. So here are some impressions from a legend that we work with. And yeah, I mean, you know, we're just trying to mix things up and have purposely built content. Now, moving on, obviously, you know, if we thinking about content, there's a ton of impacts the pandemic had on the content we serve to our audiences, right? So content is king, but I tend to say video content is King Kong, and that's really really the case in APAC, right? Where we see that appetite is just like endless, right? And you know, during the pandemic, we also saw that strong double-digit growth on video consumption, and from an OTT perspective. So that appetite is just growing and growing, right? And I think, you know, that is certainly one part of the story, but what does it mean for sports marketing and the industry I'm in? So there was a massive surge in tech-driven solutions during the pandemic, right? Bringing virtual crowds to the stadiums. Pat, you touched base on some of these bits and pieces already. Artificial sounds replicating fan cheers, remote commentary for games. It's just one trend, and you see an example, you know, here on the top of how we brought this to life. We repurposed a full game of the archive and used the content creator with 1 million subscribers across the region, and used him to talk over this with his remote commentary, right? Things have changed very much though on the sponsor side as well. During the pandemic, right? A classic entitlement like match tickets could obviously not be leveraged with no fans in the stadium, right? So what are the replacements? Substitutes in the digital space is pretty much the solution that we fell back on. Hence, we saw a massive surge in virtual events, exclusive player meet and greets, suddenly via Zoom, courtside, virtual seats in the NBA, and honestly, if you asked me, right, these, I think the live experience will come back, and obviously, you know, in some parts of the world, they came back a lot quicker than to a certain degree here in Southeast Asia. You know, in the US, things are back to normal when it comes to delivering sports events. But these virtual solutions, from my point of view, you know, I think they're really here to stay, and they're going to complement the portfolio that we have established in the past. Now, the last trend I want to just quickly touch base on, and I don't see a direct correlation as such with the pandemic, but it's just been sort of like a major trend, is the upcoming trend of NFTs. Was, you know, NFTs is a big thing, in particular in gaming, but across all sports these days, you know, and everybody's trying to get a piece of the pie there. But I think in particular when it comes to esports, which will be a bigger part of this conversation later on, we'll be seeing a lot more of that.
Tilman, really great understanding all these innovations that you're talking about, because things have certainly moved quite quickly. There's a question actually from the audience that I think is I want to address now. So let's go through it. Marketing at games like Olympics, World Cup will be typically dominated by the big brands. What can we do with a much smaller budget? And do we focus on pre-marketing or actual event marketing, or simply choose to leverage on the popularity of one most popular sport in the local market, such as football here, and pumping whatever we can do on this sport? I'd love your perspective on that, considering you work with a lot of brands.
Yeah, look, I mean, we can work with smaller budgets, right? I mean, it's not always around massive budgets when it comes to sports marketing, right? I mean, as I said earlier, right, you don't always have to invest in a massive shirt sponsorship or an event activation. I think the trend is definitely going to alternative solution, in the sense that you know, we have digital activations. You know, we sell digital sponsorships only. So, you know, you leave away that big signage, but then we come on board as a digital sponsor only, in that sense, right? So there's tons of opportunities in that regard, right? And you definitely don't need huge budgets all the time. It really depends on the purpose you have and the objective of what you want to achieve through your sports marketing initiatives.
Great. And I think just to add to this from the Mediacorp point of view, you know, you have this process, right? It's a first rights and refusal with the big sponsors around things like the Olympics or World Cup or whatever it may be. But there are actually a lot of opportunity that we created for advertisers that weren't the sponsors of the Olympics. And that's where you can go and do spot buys within the content itself. So, you know, we had those 14 live streaming channels. You could do a spot buy simply running your video pre-roll, mid-roll, when, you know, things were, you know, the athletes weren't actually, you know, competing at that time. So there was actually a lot of ways you could actually, you know, interact with the audience and drive awareness with the audience, but not necessarily be a big sponsor. And actually they were, in terms of the investment for some of our advertisers, it was really cost effective. So there's definitely different ways that you can do that, which don't obviously touch on the big sponsors themselves. So I just wanted to add some clarity to that as well. Over to you, Tilman.
Yeah, cool. All right, so actually come to my last slide already, which is about esports. And to be honest, esports is probably one, and gaming is one of the super trends, if you want, coming from the pandemic, right? We saw that sort of space really exploding over the last couple of years. Now, obviously, gaming has always been huge, and the competitive part of it in esports was also huge, but it's just sort of like the whole pandemic and really accelerated that dynamic, right? You know, from a SPORTFIVE perspective, fortunately, we were really early in that. We were early in that space, you know, in particular, in comparison to our other sports marketing agencies, we've set up a global esports unit with people in every market, you know, specialists from that space who know the space, who know the publishers, who know all the games, who know the players, and you know, we have sort of put together a team that has massive expertise, and that sort of enabled us to work with some of the great partners that you can see here on the slide. You know, if we're looking at teams, you know, we get T1, Fnatic, T1, you know, one of the powerhouses from Korea, Fnatic, a global powerhouse, and regional players like Team SMG, actually coming with that was set up by JJ Lin. And then we have tons of great publishers and that we work with, in particular Riot and EA across the region, you know. There's a great sort of dynamic that is happening across those assets, and I think it's a huge space, obviously, and very interesting in that regard, that you currently see also a great dynamic in terms of what do non-endemic brands do versus the endemic brands. So, you know, once you traditionally had all your non-endemics, so your Intels, your Reds and so on, you're now seeing a lot of non-endemic brands moving into the space. And, you know, just coming back to that example of T1 that we manage, Korea, so multiple world champion in League of Legends, we enabled them to have some great deals on board. You know, we started sponsorships with Nike on their behalf, BMW and Red Bull, just to name a few, right, on the non-endemic side. And it's interesting, right? If you look at BMW in particular, looking at a very sort of like Gen Z driven audience, it's really playing the long game here, right? They're not a lot of these young kids that are following the team, they probably can't afford right away to buy a BMW. But it's just sort of getting that audience at a very early stage, and then sustaining that conversation throughout the life cycle, right? So I think that's really interesting to see that this is happening at the moment. And that at the same time, right, the non-endemic brands, you know, if you look at T1 again, there's partners like SteelSeries, Secret Lab, Clef, some of them really long standing partners. That obviously continues, that these guys want to stay in the space because they legitimize their products through the best assets in the world, right, and through the best teams in the world. So I think it's really interesting to see how these different sectors live side by side. But I'm sure Mark has a lot more to say about that. So that's actually it from my end, and I hand it back over to you, Jenny.
Thank you, Tilman. It's a perfect segue to hand to Mark, who lives and breathes the esports space. So over to you, Mark.
Thanks, thanks, Jennifer. And before I start, I think I'd like to congratulate Tilman, I think, on the announcement with Riot Games earlier this week on the sponsorship partnership as well. I think before I start, just a quick introduction. I think just a quick introduction. My name is Mark. I'm the CEO of Team Flash, but also I'm the managing director of Reddentes Esports, a small platform Mediacorp, We are working with them on the Paralympic Games as well, the Tokyo Paralympics. So for those people who are watching, tune in tonight. Ipin Siu is swimming the 50 meters breaststroke final. So stay tuned to Mediacorp and Me Watch, and you can catch it live as well. I think before I get into the slides, I think I myself, similar with Tilman and Patrick, I think we are very traditional sports people. I came into esports around 3.5 years ago when I opened my company, and I never thought about esports at all. But I think what changed my mind was when I went to Jakarta for one esports event, I think in 2018, MSC, Mobile Legends event. And when I went into the stadium or even the arena, there were 8,000 kids over there watching the game live. And I said, shit, what am I doing, right? And why am I not in this game? Why am I not in esports? And I just went back and just to my partner, I think we need to get invested into this world of esports. And I think over the last 3 years, we have gone into the ecosystem. We have learned a lot, actually been guided by a lot of the esports professionals in the game as well, and to tell us more about the industry. And I think it has grown year upon year. And, and it's amazing seeing the growth. I think Tilman has shared quite a fair bit, with the various brands as well. And I would like to share a little bit more about esports itself. Next slide, please. I think just run a very quick, history of esports. I will not go too much in it. I think which young kid or even a young boy don't play esports. I used to play games. I used to play a lot of games like Counter-Strike, Warcraft, and others as well. But I think it has grown through the pre-20s to the early 20s, where the birth of the major esports titles from League of Legends, Dota, StarCraft, and CSGO. And as we move on, I think to 2011, I think we look at streaming. I think streaming takes the lead on content distribution, and that's the rise of Twitch TV. And I think we fast forward to, I think, 2018, 19, and when esports prize pool hits an all-time high with the TI 2019, it's 34.3 million, and the upcoming one in Romania as well has hit new heights in terms of prize money. And we'll run through in today, esports today in Asia for viewership has increased tremendously as well. But maybe just a quick sharing, I think, how do we break down a bit more into esports for our viewers who are listening in. I break down it into 3 typical fronts. One is on console, example, your Xbox and PlayStation, where you play your FIFA, your NBA 2K, where there's a lot of competitions being held. Next is on PC, which is a lot of the big events like Dota, League of Legends, and and Counter-Strike, where it has grown year upon year, and I think even with the Worlds and the TIs going to be held in October this year. And one which I'll share a little bit more about, which is mobile gaming. I think most kids, most adults, everyone has a phone on their hand, so it's very easy penetration access to anyone, and we've seen mobile gaming rise in Southeast Asia. Next. I think for the overview of Asia in 2020, I think COVID's acceleration of esports viewership, I think Patrick has shared, I think most physical sports events came to a halt. Some leagues were postponed, cancelled. Even Vietnam Football League is actually cancelled as we speak. But esports events, of course, took a little while, to recover. But in the end, there were more esports events last year. Most of the events, because it's done online, it carried on, and many people, whether at home, they were able to watch it on their PC, on their phone, and that's why the rise of the acceleration of esports viewership increased tremendously, like to almost 21% from 2019, and even players increased for over 7.3%. Next. I think the rise of mobile gaming is generally overview and market insights. I will not share too much. There are almost 3.85 million, in players in Singapore. Whether what kind of mobile gaming do you call playing Candy Crush mobile gaming? Yes, you're still playing on your phones, and you walk onto any trains or any public transport, and actually, everybody will be on their phone as well. Yeah, next. And the mobile gaming, and that's the future of esports. And I think a lot of teens, especially in Southeast Asia, has gone into mobile gaming quite a fair bit, and there's quite a fair bit of how do I break down into mobile gaming in Southeast Asia. We call it MOBAs, which is actually there are three kinds of MOBAs. One is Mobile Legends Bang Bang, which is very popular in Singapore, and Indonesia, Philippines, and and Malaysia as well. And another one is Arena of Valor, which is huge in Vietnam and in Taiwan and Thailand. And last but not least, the latest entrant to the market, which Tilman will be pushing quite a fair bit, which is League of Legends Wild Rift. It's just launched the esports competition earlier this year, and it will accumulate to the Southeast Asia Championship in Singapore. But I think as we have quite a fair bit of Singapore viewers today, I think in Singapore itself, I think it's quite a mixture of mobile gaming and PC gaming in Singapore. I think Singapore is slightly, the kids are able to afford a PC, so they are able to play their games on very good high specs PC from Aftershock, from any other games, and you see brands like HP has put in the Omen series and putting quite a fair bit into the PC space. And I think it's quite split between PC and mobile games in Singapore. But I think across the other regions like Malaysia, like Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand, mobile gaming has grown tremendously over the years, and many respective brands are looking into this space, not only in Singapore, but around the region for mobile gaming. Yeah, next. So it's also catering to a casual audience, as you can see, the quick rise, and onto the various, for esports enthusiasts and occasional viewers. So some people do watch it on and off. Some really tune in every Saturday. And, I think with the Mobile Legends League in Singapore, which is starting in the season 2, we have seen viewership increase very strongly across quite a few platforms. And I think, we've been working quite a fair bit with Mediacorp as well. I think there's quite a bit of gaming, like the EGG channel as well. And we can see a lot of, platforms as well coming onto the OTT platform coming onto this space too. Yeah, next. I think this year itself, in the activation landscape, despite COVID, I think Singapore has managed to host 3 big esports events earlier this year. Although it's offline, I think why is it offline? I think the best way, because of server issues, is that actually teams get to come down to play. Although there were no crowds because of the COVID situation, but it's brought a lot of attraction into Singapore. We have the Free Fire World Series, we have the Dota Major done by One Esports, and actually there's also the MLBB M2 event this year. From my knowledge, there are a couple of big events coming into Singapore at the end of this year. One is the Global Esports Game, which has been announced, and there are also a couple more, which I think I'll let the various games developer actually share quite a fair bit. Yeah. So this is just a quick summary of brands itself, and I think that's what Jennifer mentioned. I don't think we need what amount, how much do we need to put in. I think for brands who are willing to come in, feel free to reach out to partners, to even to Tilman's team, to Jennifer's team. I think any amount is fine. I think basically to come in, and I just like to add one main point is that, why into esports is that, my daughter, when I was talking to her, even my kids, my friends' kids, when you talk esports to them, they understand. And if you ask many of the younger generation, do they watch, I think, traditional TV? I'll just be very upfront, maybe not, but where do they watch? They are watching YouTube, they're watching me watch, and watching many various OTT platforms. And I also spoke to a lot of the traditional sports partners as well, like Premier League. They realize that fans going to the stadiums are getting older. They're kids, of course, but kids have so much distractions nowadays, right? Not only going to sports, but they can watch esports online and stuff like that. So there are also plans to reach out to the next generation. And and Premier League, just with COVID last year, they organized their own Premier League last year as well, where you have Trent Alexander, Diego Jota playing FIFA 21. It was pretty intense. And and like that, any under 23 football players, from my knowledge, when they go on training tours, the first thing they bring is actually their PlayStation. Yeah, it's no more about sports getting out going out for a pint of beer, getting out, but they're actually in their rooms playing games with one another. Yep. And I think that's the main reason I was talking to brands, that this is really the next generation if you really, really want to reach out to them. Next. So after finished with the part of more on esports, I'd like to share a bit more of Team Flash. And Team Flash, I think it's very similar to a lot of traditional sports. Do I call myself Liverpool? Do I call myself Chelsea? Do I call myself Borussia Dortmund? But we have seen, as a team, our numbers has grown tremendously through the years. Over the last 2 years, we have teams in 3 countries. In Vietnam, which is our main base, we have 4 games. AOV, which is our biggest game, if you can see from numbers. And we have a League of Legends, we have a Free Fire, and we have a Wild Rift. In Singapore, we have a few teams. We have Mobile Legends, which is starting next week. We have an e-racing team. We have a FIFA 21 team. And also we have a Brawl Star team, which cater to different target audience across the different spectrum of esports. And in Thailand, we have a PUBG mobile team as well. Yep. Next. As you can see, our weekly engagement that we get with the fans, with our AOV page, which is the biggest game in Vietnam. I think on any point of time when we are watching the games live, when our team is playing, I would say we say the El Clasico, as how they call it, against Saigon Phantom in Vietnam. On YouTube itself, we are able to get 500,000 people watching us play. In Vietnam the CCU is easily more than 700,000-800,000 across various platforms. So the kind of engagement that we get, and even if we post something up on Facebook, on IG, we get easily 5,000 likes or 7,000 likes based on individual players or individual posts. And this shows, I think a lot of the younger generation really look up to our players as a role models. They really follow our team. They really follow the players, what they do, and they watch their streams on our partners like Booyah's platform as well. Next. Yeah, just to share some figures, some numbers of some of the popular teams for AOV. Yep, next. And I think connecting partners to esports across the region, we have worked with quite a fair bit of brands, Vietjet, Clear Air, Facebook Gaming, Logitech, Under Armour, and many, many other brands. And we can see there are more brands coming in as well. A lot of, we've been getting a lot of agencies coming to us, asking getting questions, and how do we get to know your team better, especially in Vietnam, right? Right now Vietnam has been locked down for almost 9 weeks, but actually online we're still going on quite a fair bit. And there are brands like from the the household brands, like even from the instant noodles coming to us and telling us how can we, because we have the instant connection with our viewers, with our fans as well. Yep. And they are also part, even Forbes acknowledged us as a 30 under 30. Our whole AOV team actually has been part of the Forbes 30 under 30. Yep. And I think this is our partner last year was Vietjet from 2019 to 2020. I think this year they just had to stop the sponsorship as we speak. Why? It's not due to that. It's because I think for now, all of us know the aviation industry is badly hit, but they have told us that they definitely wants to come back when when everything turns back to normal. So I'd like to show a short video of what we have done for Vietjet.
Just like a movie, just like a storybook, we are the future, we're the ones they won't overlook. It's time to be the hero, rising like you've never seen, just like in a dream.
Yeah, thanks. I think many people is asking me whether the video, do we really have a plane with our team's pictures in it? But actually it was done animated, everything was done in-house, storyboard was done in-house, and we were actually very proud of this video, and Vietjet was very happy as they told us that they actually noticed easily 20-30% just by this videos going out, that actually the social media platforms have increased of the numbers of followers on their end as well. I think we'll push on with a couple of slides of brands coming in to show. I think Domino's has done quite a fair bit. I know that Doritos have also come in as well. They announced a partnership with in Thailand with Bacon Times as well. So there are many brands coming in. I think even McDonald's have also come in into Malaysia for Mobile Legends as well. So I think just like to tell the brand, do come in. I think you really get to see the traction. Yep. And I think Tilman shared quite a fair bit a little bit earlier about BMW. You know, we have 100 Thieves with Gucci. We have MasterCard, which is putting a lot of resources into League of Legends. You know, not only in Europe, if you see the Worlds, right, they have been doing so much key activation. But Cisco was part of it. Tumi has come on board recently. And League of Legends, if you see every year the finals when the trophy is being carried out, if the trophy case is actually by Louis Vuitton. Yeah. So that's the end from me. You know, I think I just shared a bit more about esports, about brands coming in. So I'll leave, you know, I'll give it back to Jennifer. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Mark. Just one last question for you. What's your biggest advice for brands that are wanting to get into esports? Where do they start? Just very quickly.
I think it can come in any form. I think for brands who are really wants to come in, I think if you want to come in small, I think no esports, you know, even the ecosystem will say no. Come in, have a taste of it. And I think if you are really into digital marketing, you know, you really see the kind of traction, the kind of activation, the engagement, especially you get with your fans, whether it's Singapore, whether it's Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand. You know, I think there are some agencies here who do regional budgets. So I think don't be afraid, just come in and you'll read. And I don't see many brands actually leave esports after coming into it. Actually, more and more, they're spending more and more money in it. Yeah.
Great. Awesome. Thank you, Mark. So we've come to the end of the session, everybody, but I do want to address the questions that we got from the audience just very quickly. The first one I want to address is what can we learn from the approach brands took for the Olympics? I'm actually going to throw this one over to Patrick from a global perspective. Over to you, Patrick.
Thanks. As I said before, I'm a journalist by profession, but I think my answer to that question is actually going to be very applicable from a marketing and advertising perspective. There's three quick takeaways, I would say. One, read the room. You know, there was some unpopularity of having these games held in Tokyo in the middle of a pandemic when cases were on the rise in Japan, and there were brands that distanced themselves from that. And there was also brands that were very sensitive in terms of the campaigns that they launched around the events, capitalize on the human experience and the shared challenge we were all going through, which I thought was smart. Two, don't let this be a one event, a one and done, 2 weeks and your branding is over. Carry that connection that you created through a huge event like this through and extend that ad campaign. We would do the same thing with our journalistic storytelling. And I think most importantly, I'm going to use the example of Simone Biles. You know, making a connection with an athlete is so vital in this day and age from an editorial point of view, but certainly from an advertising point of view. And Simone Biles, for those who don't know, world-class gymnast, the most decorated gymnast of all time, ends up withdrawing from most of the individual events, in part because of feeling pressure of expectations and taking care of her own mental wellness and mental health. And while some knee-jerk critics in the moment said, you know, hey, she's there, she's got these brand sponsorships, she's letting them down by not competing, I think it was just the opposite. She actually won a gold medal in terms of human nature by showing the courage to be vulnerable in that moment. And major brands like Athleta and Visa that have supported her going into the games doubled down on that support coming out, because it's a moment that we can all relate to as humans. Sometimes we can't relate to the athleticism and the amazing ability of these athletes, but we can relate to the human nature and the pressure of it. And I thought that was really remarkable that the Simone Biles brand has actually been increased, and her value to those sponsorship has actually been increased because she was honest and candid about it. And I think as brands, those are, you know, I touched on earlier, that emotional connection, that narrative connection, those are all things that I think are key takeaways from the games.
Great, thank you, Patrick. Great insight there. How does official sponsors compare with ambush marketing employed by other brands? Our last question, and I'm going to throw this over to Tilman.
Yeah, look, I mean, Jenny, the fundamental difference is, of course, the official sponsors they're entitled to use the IP usually of the rights holder and activate any sorts of partner rights within the guardrails of the agreed contract, right? So there are signage entitlements usually, your A-boards, digital activation opportunities, activation opportunities on site, you name it, right? Depending on how the contract is framed. So they're entitled to use all those entitlements. But then, you know, the ambushers don't have those rights. Full stop. That's to be honest, that's the difference, right? And then, you know, if they're not allowed leveraging the IP, they can be prosecuted, right? And that can get extremely expensive. So, I mean, my advice, don't do it.
Great, thank you. So that's it for today, and I want to thank the audience for joining us today. Thank you for your time. A very big thank you to the panelists today, to Mark, to Tilman all the way from Germany. I hope you get some sleep. To Patrick, good night to you, and you can also go and have some sleep. Really appreciate your time today and the amazing insights that you shared. To everybody else in the audience today, thank you for your time and stay safe, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
You guys.